Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar this afternoon for the second of a series of 3 that Martin McBride is delivering for us. Today we are going to focus on international trade fairs and lead generation, and we will have a conversation about showcase within that. So it's trade fairs in an international context and how you can lead generate from them. So as with last week, and we will make sure that you all get a chance to ask your questions, please put them into the Q&A or the chat. And with that, I will hand over to Martin. So thank you, Martin.
All right, Emer, no problem. And listen, I'm going to lead with a slide deck, but maybe just to say before I start that I've widened the conversation out quite a bit from just one particular trade show, but I've looked at the fact that it's part of a mix. We need to be looking at a range of approaches to generating leads and maybe changing the way we think about that process and recalibrating the way we think, because there's a lot of research now that suggests and that confirms, it does more than suggest, it confirms that buying is changing quite a lot and the way buyers act and spend their time is changing a lot. So we as people who are selling to them need in turn to change quite a lot. So let's use a slide deck to create an agenda or to set some structure. Happy to take questions at any stage through the thing, interruption, or hang on till the end, I don't really mind. But I'm looking at this as an issue of acquiring new customers. I'm doing it in a 3-pronged way. What do we need to do in order to acquire business, new business in a business-to-business context? We're looking at retail because showcase is dominated by buyers and retailers who visit. And a couple of the key issues that I want to look at here are thinking about qualifying customer opportunities. And I want to do that because I have concerns sometimes that we can be dazzled in the headlights of the attractive big brand retailers who come to us, like a friend of mine in Scotland who I work with, who produces very high quality leather handbags. You know, the big dazzling approach by Fortnum and Mason and leading to very little, high maintenance, low volumes, messing around with margins, demanding delivery, but providing very little continuity or certainty around volumes. And actually ultimately leading to would we just walk away from that, please? Because there may be lots of other customers that are more appropriate, and actually caused her to think quite hard about what is the right customer? What's the right customer opportunity for me and my business? And maybe it's not the big shiny one that comes to me who have more perhaps their interests at heart than mine. So we want to just explore that a little. Then if we do identify customers we want to target, rather than always being the victim of them targeting us, how do we approach that? And as I said, buying has changed, so we need to think a little bit about the way we need to make that approach. And there are a couple of great examples of how that's happened even during pandemic last year, and in 1 or 2 cases by accident. But I'll explain the outturn from that and the consequence, which is the attraction of some really quite new and some interesting customers, almost without working at it too hard. So there's a lesson to be learned there. And finally, when we get in front of people, the approach we take to selling to people, or indeed not selling to people too hard at all, but cultivating a relationship rather than cultivating a sale. So 3 broad strands in what is a relatively short time, and we can explore them with some questions. So in terms of profiling customers, not something people spend enough time doing. We don't discriminate enough. We don't maybe sit down and think about the fact that some customers I should turn down, not choose, walk away from, or screen out. So what does that screening thing actually mean? And there's a couple of thoughts I just want to put on the table. And I like this little matrix and set of questions, but let me just put some shape on it. You know, what is my brand proposition? And that can evolve and change. There are a number of companies I've worked with in craft and design where the brand proposition has evolved and matured and isn't the same now. One case in point in particular that I'm working with quite closely this year, that is really being reassessed, and it's grown up a little bit, it's matured a little bit. It might have been small and marginal and making its way in the world, and then becoming the aspiring brand in a particular product category. And now, to be frank, maybe is starting to grow up and become quite established and quite mature in a particular category as the main brand, the one to lead. And that is something we need to be aware of. Does that then change the sort of customer that we should be thinking a little bit about, and which buyers and which stores complement or indeed enhance that brand proposition? So what values do I associate with my brand? What themes, what messaging? Have I defined that clearly enough? And that then has to fit with the type of customer that I think either complements, builds, supports, or in fact is highly marginal for that brand proposition. So it's worth thinking that through, and it's also worth continually challenging that as we grow, as perhaps our perception of competition changes, as the brand evolves, as our design ideas evolve. So that always needs to be challenged in our own heads, because the customer certainly will challenge it for us, as will retailers. So we need to be maybe ahead of that game. And then with retailers, apart from them being attracted to the brand proposition, they're attracted to the money piece. You know, I've often maybe cynically said retailers are in the real estate business. You know, if they've got a retail outlet in Dublin, on the west coast of Ireland, in Fifth Avenue, New York, they have rent to pay, and they're in real estate, and they need to make turnover per square foot. And how do we contribute to that in terms of our proposition, the product, how it's displayed, the square footage it might occupy, what the margin per square foot might be? And I've been in many conversations where that has proven to be valuable, because they see you then not just as a designer, as a crafter, but as a commercial person who contributes to the profitability of their store. And that in turn can be terribly valuable when talking to a distributor. So I go back in my mind to conversations with distributors in Germany on one occasion with somebody in the craft sector, and being able to sit down with German distributor to say, these are the types of customers in Germany we think are important. And our experience of our best stores in Ireland and a couple of very good stores in the UK is that we can generate this kind of revenue. And our display stands are these. So we know what our revenue per square foot in some of our best stores are. You can tell your stores in Germany that story, as well, of course, as selling them a brand proposition. So that raises the question, of course, is whether we need a channel partner. And that may not be the case, but actually the point I want to get across today is it doesn't matter what you think. Does your customer think you need or you want a channel partner? Does your customer in America or your customer in Germany think actually buying direct from you is not something I'm comfortable with? You're too far away. We may want to have local stock. We may want the assurance of somebody locally or closer to here who can provide us with that backup and that fulfillment service. So we need to be quite open to listening to the customer and understanding how in turn we provide that competitive customer retailer experience driven by what they want, not just by what we think from a distance we should provide. And that's something that's terribly important. And unfortunately is a concern for me, because there's a piece of research I want to share in a few minutes, which says we don't always listen enough when we're selling. And maybe we need to do that more to understand what their requirements are, what experience they want from us, what role a channel might play or not, the commercial return they're expecting, and how that brand proposition fits into their business. So all of us, I think, owe it to ourselves and our brands and our margins and our bank account to have a degree of clarity around what ideally profiles a good customer. And it's not always going to exist in the way we want it to, but what's the preference? On the law of averages, what would we prefer in terms of size? Whether it should be that big, shiny tier one, Fortnum and Masons or not. Actually, it wasn't. Yeah, maybe it's got PR value. Maybe it creates value on Twitter for a few hours or on a PR piece. But then it doesn't, because actually it's frustrating trying to service their requirements. They click their fingers and you have to jump, and it's how high and it's how fast. And then it's about call off stock of miserable volumes. And you're thinking, hang on, we haven't really thought about the customers we should be targeting here. So what is their profile? And what is their volume potential? What is their footfall? Who's their customer? What's their affluence level? Will there be consistency of demand? Is it very touristy? Is it very cyclical? And will they pay us? And also, of course, the buying process in something like Fortnum and Mason's is complex, challenging. Who am I talking to? Who's the buyer? But who's the head of particular product categories? What are they positioning my product against? Because buyers and then merchandisers will influence that. And if I'm small, am I going to get heard? Or am I just a pawn here? And that raises all sorts of questions about the type of customer we should be profiling and approaching and targeting. And just be careful about being dazzled by the lights, because it's not always about that. It's about actually commercial success. So the approach, how do we handle that? And one theme that I've always had in my head from working with a guy early in my career is people like to buy things, but they don't like to be sold to. And that happens a lot. That's characteristic of all of us. We don't want to be approached in a store to be helped sometimes. We want to choose the moment when we seek that help. And the same in this type of purchasing situation. Buyers like to buy things, but they often like to be in control of that process. They don't like us to be too pushy and selling to them too hard. And there's a balance there. And that balance is changing even more in terms of communication. It's moving from a tendency to push, which is, I want you to buy this. This is what it is. This is my product. To pull, which is actually what I'd like to do is get the messaging right, put it out there through social media, through digital channels, where buyers can find it and maybe approach me, create desire through subtle messaging, through good content. And that increasingly, all the research suggests, is a way that resonates with the way that buyers are changing. And this is important stuff from the point of view of the way that those buyers are changing. And here's some research. You might think, God, boring listening to talking about buyers and how they change the way they work. Well, if we're sellers, we need to know this a little. And I've picked out a couple of snippets from DemandJam, which is a company that I work with that does a lot of research on buying. So they have just about 40% of the meetings they used to have 10 years ago. 40%. Used to have 10 a week. Now I do 4. 6 are in the bin. And that is nothing whatsoever to do with COVID. This year is a complete aberration. They don't have any at the moment, apart from online. So that's not the COVID trend. That's just the trend in the way that buying has changed profoundly. That may, in fact, when the research is updated, accelerate even when COVID recedes and we can go back to meetings. But more and more also, when they want to talk to us, they'll call us. And that's where the Fortnum and Mason thing arose with my friend in the north of Scotland. They call us, we're dazzled in the headlights, and we're drawn in because we haven't got that profile of our customer strategy. Who do we want to sell to? And am I actively pursuing customers? And of course, if I'm not actively pursuing customers, anyone who rings me looks good, because where there's a vacuum, anything kind of looks good. So important that we think about this. Buyers don't have meetings that much anymore. And when they want us, they'll call us. So what are they doing with their time? They're busy. They'll always profess to be busy. What they're doing with their time is driven by the fact that the web has changed profoundly everything about buying and selling. So if you look at that pipeline thing on the right-hand side of that screen, and that old sales funnel that we used to work with, where you tell people about what you do, you might have to educate them about something, your ideas, your brand proposition, your materials, the inspiration behind what you produce, and try and get in their head so that they're considering whether to buy you or not. And then we get to the point of talking about how this works, volumes and timings and deliveries and margins. But actually the front end of that is not done in selling anymore very much, because they'll do that online. So they don't want to listen to us as salespeople. Why? Because to be frank, we've done it to ourselves. We're not good enough at what we've done. We've been underprepared. We've talked too much. We haven't listened half enough. And now they have the opportunity to put us in the bin, and they've taken it. All the research confirms. So that's pushing us into the situation where we now have to respond. So what are we going to do about it? Nothing. Okay, curl up in a corner and feel sorry for ourselves. Actually, no, we've got to come out fighting and say we've got to adopt a three-pronged approach. And that three-pronged approach to generating leads includes digital, it includes networking. And networking, of course, is being in the right place at the right time. And that can be showcase. It can be an online event like I'm joining tomorrow, which is an online networking event. It happens to be in Scotland. where there's a guest speaker who is a very prominent jeweler selling very strongly into the US market, but there will be a networking element to that discussion tomorrow afternoon. And the third piece is the direct bit, which we often just resort to too quickly, which is if we target people, we email people, we want to ring them, and we want to cut to the chase in sales. And actually, increasingly, that's not going to work. We've got to do all three pieces of this jigsaw. Networking is kind of cancelled at the moment, except online. And as I said, that event that I'm attending tomorrow afternoon online, which is about networking. Well, it's also about a case study of best practice. We've got to think about all of these three things, and the digital and the networking piece, feeds into the marketing discussion, building awareness, education, making them think that's interesting. What kind of content makes people think it's interesting, so that we do get to have a conversation about sales, whether that's online or visiting at the right time. But increasingly, buyers are now moving online to do Zoom because they realize that's the only practical way to work in 2021, and maybe beyond that, to be frank. So our approach, we need to be softly, but we do absolutely need to be persistent and patient and persuasive, and bear in mind that point about push to pull. Create customer interest, not push messaging at them. Now, I have said to other people on occasion, now that you've created that interest online, you're building your followers, you're having the conversations. Now you start to be a wee bit more pointed about, go and buy my thing, please, and introduce some of that call to action. But at the start, I think there's an element of creating interest. And coming back a little bit, what's our digital footprint like? Are we random with our social media? Are we building followers? Have we got content plans that are substantive, that are solid, that really reflect our brand, that tell stories that create interest and entertain and educate about the sense of history, the materials, the ideas, whatever it drives your creative thinking? And that content is important. And some companies are too random with it, and others are good at it. And I'm absolutely, completely clear in my mind that I really didn't know enough about digital marketing until working with a couple of companies through pandemic last year, and really driving and upscaling and investing more in digital content to replace retail with online sales, to replace retail with driving interest amongst the retail trade for when things open up again. And that, seeing people who have talent in digital marketing, makes some of us realize how little we actually know. My job, I guess, in a lot of situations I'm involved in, is to deploy those digital marketing skills from talented people who are way younger than I am. Some of us, unfortunately, are in a position where we have to learn to do it ourselves, but we do need to learn to do it ourselves, not random posting as though it's our buddies on Facebook. Strategic posting, strategic content development, so that we're more clinical about the way we release those messages out into the market. Softly, but persistent and patient and persuasive and consistent as well, is a word I should probably add to that slide. So we create customer interest. And something I should say, there's a friend of mine in Donegal, which I'm very close to, where I'm sitting right now. And I've worked with her sporadically over the last few years, mainly through small things that Emer has done indeed, and also just from knowing where she is and being relatively close to her. And her intention has been over the years to be trying to open up retail in parts of Ireland, partly the UK, USA, trying, stridently trying actually. And actually during the pandemic, she stopped trying because that wasn't really a good use of time. It wasn't relevant. Retail was closed for a lot of the year. And she took her foot off that gas and started selling online and modified the product range a little so that there was a price point mix. Some of it was quite high price point. We introduced other products, a range of gift products, accessible self-gifting products, and still some more expensive products. And in doing that, focused on talking to her customers, her consumers one-to-one, built up some success, celebrated that success a little online, got her customers to talk about their products online, created more and more of a community. And guess what's happened? a lot of the retailers that she was trying too stridently to sell to have now started to come back to her and realizing we're following her activity online. She's creating brand interest. She's doing the pull thing kind of inadvertently, but it proves the point that she's created customer interest and been selling to those customers by not selling to them. And that is a message I think that's important to get across in the way that buyers are now changing the way they work. So when we do get a chance, if we do get a chance to engage, when she gets a chance to engage, when any of us do that, we've got to remember this again. People like to buy things, but they don't like to be sold to. And that kind of applies, that mantra applies to the messaging online, maybe to the approach we take to DemandJam face-to-face. So there's another little gem of research from that company, DemandJam, that I want to share, which is an accusation that is leveled at us as salespeople internationally, but probably everywhere, by buyers. And it's kind of damning. And it explains why they now have far fewer meetings than they used to, because they can choose to do a lot of the early stage work online. They don't need to listen to us because we didn't and don't ask all the right questions. Maybe we talk too much. Maybe we just blast at them about our product. Maybe we are effusive and maybe we are proud of products, but maybe we just don't devalve enough to stop and ask some questions and listen to the answers. And perhaps don't ask enough of the right people, because if we're going to Fortnum & Mason's, maybe there are 4 or 5 people we need to start cultivating relationships with and spend time doing that. And if we're just trying to get to the end game and get orders, maybe our impatience means our listening skills are compromised. We're trying to be optimistic. So we're not really listening and we don't know the value of the answers that we're being given. We're not reading all the signals and we're not necessarily seeking the truth that actually Fortnum & Mason's isn't really that good. Maybe we're so enthused that we come away from the first couple of meetings just with these rose-tinted spectacles and we're thinking, actually, if I'd read the signals and asked a lot of hard questions about the merchandising, about the volume, about the response times, if I'd really gone into this, maybe I would have realized this is not a runner. I was too dazzled by the lights and I didn't do my job as a salesperson, which is mostly about what's on this slide. So consultative sales, that just means ask lots of questions. Consult, listen, understand. So to unlock international customers' requirements and create a bit of a basis for a relationship, that's really, really important. And it's not complex. It's, when you think about it, just very human dynamics, simple interpersonal skills. Showing interest in someone makes them more interested in you. Asking questions of someone draws them in. Talking at them pushes them away. And we need to just remember that, because the focus, in my opinion, should be on creating a customer, not on creating a sale. The sale will look after itself, as my friend in Donegal has discovered by not pushing at those retailers in 2020, but by telling stories online, talking about our story online, introducing new products, having an engagement with our customers online. Some of those retailers have now kind of been sold to and like the story they're hearing and are now coming back to her and saying, can you talk to us? Can we talk about when things reopen? Because we like what we're looking at. And she's created a customer, kind of by default, not sale. The sale's now coming. Because what buyers, all the research are now interested in says, they're interested in is integrity and trust, which is being demonstrated by that online content, and not selling skills, not negotiating skills. Not impressed if you're a hustler. Not impressed by that talking at me all the time thing. Actually, I like the sense of interpersonal comfort and trust and integrity that comes across from somebody who actually asks questions and who tells stories online and engages with customers through digital content. So it helps to unlock. It's important that we try to unlock through a bit of research from a distance. Should I be in Fortnum & Mason's? Don't know, not sure. Well, go and ask and do some serious questioning and try to understand their business, understand the fit, and don't just go and sell to them. It's not all about making a pitch. Listen and consult, and then just sometimes say, well, actually, I'm not sure. But we then need to go away and do research and find some other customers. But constant transmission is not the right use of an opportunity. to focus on the customer rather than the sale. It's important that we don't do that. So to wrap up, and to take some questions if there's discussion points, as I said, same mantra. And there's a few little snippets of research emerging in the last couple of weeks from a new piece of work that DemandJam have done, prospecting for customers. And I like this headline, which is content is the new digital bait that draws international buyers in. Content is the bait. And that's interesting. And we as Celts should be good at storytelling, creating the bait, whether you're from Donegal and associating your brand with the history of the place, whether you're from down the west, whether the story is about the raw materials and the inspirations from your life or your travels that funnel into the design of your product. Let's create that digital bait that draw those international buyers in and create that, and understanding not just how to write it, but where to place it and where to put it to attract their interest. And then when they do that, if we have some skills around search and data and analytics, international buyers leave a footprint. And can we track that footprint when they visit our sites, when they come to our website, when they engage with our social media? Are we tracking that? The number of people who I know who draw some people in, the story, the bait draws people in, but we don't capture the information. Have that conversation with somebody even last week and saying, well, have you not asked them to register, share their email address, track who they are? No, not doing that. Procurement, on average, 5 people are involved in a business-to-business buying decision. We need to ask who else should be involved, connect with them online, share stories with them through social media so that we do ultimately connect with them. And the final point for today is this one, which is educate me. When they want to hear stories about the bait piece, it's about new ideas, new solutions, new stories. And it doesn't all have to be products and designs. It can be where you're from, the story of a customer, the story of somebody who bought your product and gifted it. Educate me about all of that. And that's what's created real inward interest amongst customers from my friend in Donegal, who actually had a great year last year by not selling and creating customer interest by not selling too hard. So questions, discussions, issues, happy to take those. I'll drop down the screen if that's all right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great, Martin. Listen, thank you so much. That was really useful and to the point, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. And it's really great to look at things with a fresh eye. I think we kind of get stuck in a certain mindset when we're looking at things. I have a question for you, and it's about a mix. If you can shed any light on what do you think going 2021, 22, the mix between online trade fairs and bricks and mortar would be? Would you be thinking
in the trade shows?
Yeah.
I can't see many shows happening this year at all. Listen, there's a company I'm involved with on the board of in Scotland in the craft and design business, and we've assumed the shows are off, and we're in fact developing our own virtual event. Now the company's big enough to do that, and we're going to create a virtual event and have a number of speakers and like an exhibition of new products, and combine a little bit of knowledge, leadership, design, speaker interest, entertainment with some presentation of product. So we're working on the basis that shows are not happening this year, really. And whatever about society starting to open up, mass participation events will still be problematic, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Now,
I'm a medic, but that's my hunch. That's what we're working on.
Yeah, we've had a huge response to our e-commerce boot camp, which we've been encouraging everybody to apply for, and because as we've discussed, it's kind of gone 5 years work into 5 months. So that's really important. So I would say, with a couple of trade shows would be people's main, bricks and mortar, would there be their main channel?
Yes.
And I think that there would be, but I'd like you to tease this out. there would be reason to maybe invest the money that they would have spent on that show.
Yeah, redeploy.
On digital. I mean, redeploy
Redeploy.
digital. Would you think so?
The most successful craft company that I work with last year took a view that it needed to fundamentally change its business model in March. Shops closed. I was in Dublin at a meeting with them on the 12th of March when Leo went on the radio at 11 o'clock, because we were on a coffee break. I remember it so vividly, saying, we're all locking down, lads. And completely back into the meeting, redefined the business model. Presumed shows are out of the picture for quite some time. Retail is going to be compromised. So we were looking at building online more and made a rapid commitment to growing that quite quickly. Took the money that we had intended to go to New York to a couple of events and said, forget about that. We're going to rebuild the website, rebuild our digital marketing, no events, take all that budget and put it into communicating in the way the world now expects. And that was a wee bit of a risk, but it worked exceptionally well. And last year finished ahead of the year before. We would have been delighted if we'd been down 20%. We were up a good 40%. And I think that's, decisive action is important. If we assume the world is going back to where it was in 2019, I think we're going to lose. It will go back a little, but it won't go back to that level because, as we were saying when we were chit-chatting, part of the joy of craft is the shopping experience. It's kind of compromised. Shopping is nervy now. It's not the same crack. It's not relaxed. It might get back to being that, but it won't for a while. But equally, there's such a movement online. If you look at the shopping experience that lots of crafters have created online, which is very good, it makes it very simple. I just bought everything online from craft companies in Ireland at Christmas, and the experience that you have there now is quite good. It's been smoothed out a lot, and when you look at augmented reality and things like that, and that allows people to do an awful lot with products and the way we present them and how we show them. And so therefore, I think we need to look at both and not presume, sure, it'll be grand again next year. It might be, but only if we adapt as well. There's a couple of questions coming in too. Emer, just when should you stop persuading a potential customer and realize they're not interested? I think that's a very difficult. I think that comes back to my question, which is stop persuading at all and ask questions. And maybe that point from Elke does sum up that slide, in that our task becomes one of actually asking questions a lot more than persuading. Because if we ask more questions and we talk a little bit about their budget cycles, the products that they're interested in taking on, how many new products they're planning to introduce, whether we fit with that, ask rather than persuade. And then I think we've got to hopefully get the signals. Yeah, a couple of others. No, those were other comments just about people who were saying that was grand and that they don't, they haven't got any questions. Okay, okay, so yeah, ask more than talk.
Your presentation was so comprehensive that I mean, what we're getting is thank you, and it was comprehensive, and that they have no questions.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I probably secretly think that people think after a discussion like that can be, oh Christ, I've got to now become better with digital marketing, which isn't always something that people want to hear. And I'm going to be honest, from a lot of the people that I engage with on the craft sector, they openly acknowledge that they do it sporadically. It's not brilliant. It's a bit, here and there. And that's not, we need to learn. And it's not good news that sometimes we have to learn a new skill set because the world has changed. I'm fortunate enough in the places I'm working with, we hire somebody to do that. And I empathize with people who are smaller and who do need to learn. I had an interesting conversation with somebody last evening. And the only training course that was available in digital marketing was through a local college. And they were providing a sort of an evening diploma, and it was quite a lot of evenings. And I kind of said to her, don't do it, because that course is designed for someone who might then want to go and get a job in digital marketing, and you don't need to. You just need to learn how to do it a little better. So maybe Leos and people like that need to offer more of those digital marketing courses, not to train people to become digital marketers, simply to train people to use the toolkit a wee bit better. and a wee bit more consistently and a wee bit more comfortably. But then equally, there's another woman in the jewelry business in Donegal I was chatting to recently, and she keeps telling me, I've got all these stories and all these ideas in my head. Well, in that case, what I've said to her is, don't write them into Twitter. Don't sit down with Instagram or with your Twitter feed and start typing them directly in. Set up a folder of stories and create a reservoir and a little library of your stories, and then go in and edit them and turn some of them into little Twitter snapshots, and edit some of the others and turn them into slightly longer pieces of narrative, which can go on your website, and then edit them offline and drop them into the online forum when you're comfortable with them. But she had been sitting with her phone going, my brain's empty. But don't sit with your flipping phone. Actually write them out longhand. Take notes, do them on your computer, and put them into Twitter later when you're comfortable that they're right. And she now has loads of stories, and she now needs to start using those stories. Breda, what sector was the company in that succeeded online? And yeah, it was textiles, some ladies' outerwear, and then in order to bring those price points into a better sort of gifting range, and when I say range, I mean in price range terms, scarves, pashminas, head bands, things like that. And I don't want to say who it is, but she's made it more accessible. That's more gifting. And I found one of the trends of this year has been self-gifting. People can't go anywhere. They can't go out for dinner. They're buying themselves more stuff, and they're also buying friends whose events they can't go to more stuff. And some of that might be jewelry, some of it might be textiles, or a whole range of different kinds of gifts. If I look at what I've been buying myself, and I've bought more craft this year, and that's the thing we all need to think about. I've bought more craft this year than ever because I can't go to people's parties or functions or events, and we're not traveling. So that sector was textiles, but I've seen it happen in other sectors as well.
Good.
So those are the main questions. And if you're gobsmacked about the concept of having to go and learn about digital marketing more, feel free. If there's any questions, people can post those afterwards and bounce them on to me.
Exactly. If I could just, Martin, before I thank you and wrap up, I'm going to do a quick plug. Again, the Leos and the DCCI have come together to offer an e-commerce bootcamp, and it's accessible and it's practical. And the closing date is 24th of February. And if we're oversubscribed, which we're going to be, we are going to run another one with the Leo, and it'll bring everyone up, no matter what stage of digital engagement you're at. You have to have a basic digital footprint, but we will work at all stages. So it'll be accessible. So I'd like everybody who's here today to think about applying. It'll take a certain level of commitment, but it won't be a tedious course. So with that, how do we register for the workshop? Is that, I presume that's the e-commerce bootcamp? Just if you go on to the DCCI opportunities, you'll find it. Okay. So Martin, thank you so much for your time. It's
no problem.
Really, it's really appreciated. It was factual, to the point, got everybody thinking. There are a lot of thank yous coming in. Thank you very much. Great advice. And until the next time.
Good job. No bother.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.